The mirror showed 2 lines that should have been impossible. Hollis gripped the marble sink of the tower bathroom, watching his hands shake, watching his reflection fracture like the moment was too big for glass to hold. 6 years of suppressants. 6 years of careful pills swallowed in the dark before dawn. 6 years of keeping his body locked down, locked away, locked safe. 2 pink lines said none of it had mattered. His first thought was that the test was wrong. Defective. He'd bought it from a healer in the lower wards, someone who didn't ask questions, and the packaging had been dusty. Old stock. Unreliable. That was the explanation. That had to be the explanation. But his body knew. His body had known for weeks. The nausea he'd blamed on nerves. The exhaustion he'd blamed on the claiming draught still working through his system. The strange, aching tenderness in his chest that he'd refused to name. His body had been telling him the truth. He'd just been too afraid to listen. 6 years of suppressants. 6 years of control. And a single potion undid all of it. The claiming draught. Cormac's gift for a promising apprentice. The purple liquid that had burned down his throat like swallowing lightning. The tether that had snapped into place inside his chest. The bond that linked his magical core directly to the alphas. Hollis had known it was dangerous. He'd known it was wrong. He hadn't known it would override everything. His suppressants, his training, his carefully constructed armor against his own biology. Now there was a heartbeat inside him that wasn't his own. A second life. A consequence. The voice came through the door like smoke finding cracks. Come out, little scholar. Not a request. Never a request. Cormac didn't make requests. He made statements that sounded like choices until you tried to refuse them. And then you discovered they'd never been choices at all. Hollis didn't move. His reflection stared back at him. Pale, exhausted, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness. He'd been in the tower for 3 months. 3 months of learning magic, of sharing meals, of sleeping in Cormac's chambers because the bond made separation painful. 3 months of telling himself he was still a spy, still on mission, still loyal to the Council of Healers who had sent him here. The Council. The mission. The grimoire he was supposed to steal. Everything he'd been sent to do felt distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. Hollis. The voice again. Closer now. Cormac was leaning against the doorframe, his presence a weight even through the wood. I can feel your distress through the bond. Open the door. The bond. Always the bond. The tether that connected them, that let Cormac sense his emotions, that made hiding anything impossible. Hollis had learned to resent it and crave it in equal measure. The constant hum of another person's awareness, the knowledge that he was never truly alone. He unlocked the door. Cormac stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the candlelight from the corridor. 32 years old, dark hair streaked with silver, hands covered in old scars that suggested magical accidents or intentional wounding. He was beautiful in a way that made Hollis's instincts scream danger even now, even after everything. His eyes found the test in Hollis's hand. The silence stretched. You're pregnant, Cormac said. Not a question. I don't, Hollis's voice cracked. The suppressants should have prevented this. 6 years. I've been taking them for 6 years. They've never failed before. The claiming draught interferes with suppression magic. It's designed to override external controls. That's how it creates the bond between magical cores. Cormac stepped closer. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered beneath the surface. Something that might have been fear or might have been wonder. I should have warned you. You should have warned me. Hollis laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You should have told me a lot of things. You should have told me the potion was a claiming draught instead of an enhancement. You should have told me the bond would be permanent. You should have told me. I know what I should have done. Cormac's voice was quiet. I know what I did instead. Then why? Why did you do it? Cormac didn't answer immediately. He looked at Hollis, really looked, the way he'd looked at him during their first meeting in the observatory, when Hollis had still believed he was in control of the situation. The way someone looks at a puzzle they're still trying to solve. Because the moment you walked into my tower, I felt the Council's magical signature on you. Marking you. Tracking you. preparing you for harvesting. He paused. I bound you to protect you. The claiming draught severed their connection, made you invisible to their tracking spells. Hollis stared at him. What? The Council of Healers isn't what you think it is. They're not protecting Omegas. They're farming them, draining their magic, using them as vessels for power they can't generate themselves. Cormac's jaw tightened. I've been fighting them for 7 years. And when I realized they'd sent you into my tower as a spy, I understood they were finally escalating. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Hollis felt the ripples spreading outward, destabilizing everything he'd believed. You knew I was a spy. From the first moment. The forged credentials. The recording crystal in your satchel. The way you asked questions that were just slightly too specific. Cormac almost smiled. Almost. You're not a very good liar. Then why did you keep me? Why didn't you? Because you were in danger. Because the Council was going to use you and discard you the way they've used and discarded dozens of Omegas before you. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who deserved better than being a tool for an institution that doesn't see Omegas as people. Cormac stepped closer. Because I wanted to give you a choice. Even if the choice was between one cage and another. Hollis's hand moved to his stomach. The pregnancy was still theoretical, too early for physical signs, too early for anything except the test and the certainty in his body. But it was real. It was happening. And it was happening inside a bond he hadn't consented to, with an alpha who had known everything from the beginning. You should have told me, Hollis whispered. You should have given me the choice. Yes. Cormac's voice was raw. I should have. I was afraid that if I told you the truth, you would run back to the Council. And they would have killed you. So you took the choice away instead. Silence. Yes, Cormac said finally. I did. And I'm sorry. And I know that's not enough. Hollis closed his eyes. The bond hummed between them. Not painful, not demanding, just present. Just real. He could feel Cormac's emotions through it now. Guilt, fear, something that might have been hope. His telling the truth. He actually believes he was protecting me. The thought should have made him angrier. Instead, it made him tired. But that's not where this story begins. It begins 3 months earlier, when everything still felt like choice. When Hollis Ashford arrived at the tower with forged credentials and a recording crystal in his satchel and the absolute certainty that he was the hunter, not the hunted. It begins on a cold autumn evening, with candlelight flickering across stone walls carved with binding sigils, and a sorcerer waiting at the top of a spiral staircase. The Tower of Cormac Thorne was built into a cliff face overlooking the shattered vale. It had stood for 300 years, according to the records, though no one could agree on who had built it or why. The stone was dark, almost black, veined with silver that caught the moonlight and glowed faintly in the dark. The windows were narrow, the stairs were steep, and every surface was covered in sigils. Binding spells, protection wards, magical notations in languages Hollis didn't recognize. Hollis arrived at sunset with his forged credentials and his hidden equipment and his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The Council of Healers had prepared him for 18 months. They'd taught him to lie, to observe, to record, to report. They'd given him a cover story, promising young scholar, eager to learn, desperate for mentorship, and enough magical training to pass as competent without seeming threatening. They'd told him Cormac Thorne was dangerous, a rogue sorcerer using dark magic to bind Omegas to his will. They'd told him he was doing something noble. Hollis had believed them. He'd wanted to believe them. The alternative, that he was just another tool in a larger game, was too frightening to consider. The tower door opened before he could knock. Cormac Thorne stood in the threshold, silhouetted against the candlelight from within. He was taller than Hollis had expected. Older. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and his hands, visible as he gestured for Hollis to enter, were covered in old scars in patterns that suggested magical accidents. Or intentional wounding. You're the scholar, Cormac said. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command. Hollis Ashford. The Council sent me. They said you might be willing to take an apprentice. The council. Something flickered in Cormac's expression. Not quite suspicion. Not quite amusement. Something in between. They don't usually send me their best. I'm not their best. I'm just eager. Willing to learn. Eager. Willing. Cormac stepped aside, gesturing for Hollis to enter. We'll see. The tower's interior was exactly what Hollis had expected and nothing like it. The main hall was vast, spiraling upward into darkness, lined with bookshelves and work tables and glass cases containing artifacts Hollis didn't recognize. The air smelled like old paper and candle wax and something sharper underneath. Ozone, maybe. The residue of recent spellcasting. You'll stay in the eastern chamber, Cormac said, leading him up the spiral staircase. It's small, but it has a window. The view is unpleasant, but honest. Unpleasant how? You'll see in the morning. The eastern chamber was indeed small. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a window that looked out over the shattered veil. Hollis could see why Cormac had called the view honest. The veil was a wasteland, scarred by some ancient magical catastrophe, the ground still cracked and smoking in places. It was ugly and terrible and completely unapologetic about what it was. Hollis unpacked his satchel carefully, making sure the recording crystal was hidden beneath his spare robes, the magical scanner tucked into the lining. He'd been trained to set up his equipment immediately, to begin gathering intelligence the moment he arrived. Instead, he stood at the window and watched the sun set over the veil. What am I doing here? The thought surprised him. He'd been so focused on the mission, on the credentials, the cover story, the 18 months of training, that he hadn't stopped to ask whether he actually wanted to be here. Whether he believed in what he was doing. The council had told him Cormac was dangerous. They'd shown him evidence of dark magic, of Omegas bound against their will, of magical practices that violated every ethical code the council claimed to uphold. But standing in the tower, watching the sun set over the veil, Hollis felt something he hadn't expected. Curiosity. Not about the mission. About Cormac. The first week passed in a blur of magical theory and careful observation. Cormac was brilliant. Casually brilliant. He explained complex spell structures the way other people explained recipes, as if the logic was obvious, as if anyone could do it if they just paid attention. He asked Hollis questions that felt like they were testing the depth of his knowledge, looking for cracks in his cover story. What do you know about binding magic? Cormac asked on the third day. They were in the observatory at the top of the tower, surrounded by star charts and astronomical instruments. The ceiling was glass, domed, showing the night sky in all its cold, indifferent beauty. Only what the council teaches, Hollis said carefully. That it's dangerous. That it violates the will of the bound person. That it should only be used in extreme circumstances. The council teaches a lot of things. Cormac's tone was neutral, but something in his expression suggested he found the council's teachings insufficient. Do you believe them? I don't know enough to have an opinion. Honest. Cormac turned to look at him. Most people pretend to know more than they do. You don't. I'm here to learn. Pretending would defeat the purpose. Cormac studied him for a moment longer. Then he produced a small vial from his robes, purple liquid that glowed faintly in the starlight. This will enhance your magical sensitivity. Help you learn faster. It's a gift for apprentices who show promise. The liquid swirled in the vial, hypnotic and strange. Hollis should have refused. He'd been trained to refuse unknown potions, to be suspicious of gifts, to never consume anything he hadn't prepared himself. But Cormac was watching him with those dark, assessing eyes, and refusing would have raised questions. Would have broken his cover. Would have ended the mission before it began. Hollis drank it. It burned down his throat like swallowing lightning. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tower spun. His skin felt like it was vibrating at a frequency just beyond hearing. His magical core, the part of him that had always been muted, suppressed, locked away, surged to life with a violence that knocked the breath from his lungs. Cormac caught him before he fell. One hand on his shoulder, steadying him, and Hollis felt something snap into place inside his chest. A tether. A line connecting his magical core directly to Cormac's. What did you do? Hollis gasped, pulling away. His magic felt alien in his own body, responsive to Cormac's presence in a way that had nothing to do with consent. Cormac's expression was unreadable. Protected you. Whether you understand that yet or not. Protected me from what? From the council. From the magical signature they embedded in you. From the harvesting they were planning the moment you returned to them with my grimoire. Cormac stepped back, giving him space. I know what you are, Hollis. I've known since you arrived. The forged credentials. The recording crystal in your satchel. The way you've been mapping the tower's layout every night after I go to bed. Hollis's blood ran cold. You. I've been fighting the council for 7 years. I know their training methods. I know their spies. I know the way they mark their operatives with tracking sigils designed to look like harmless magical residue. Cormac's voice was steady, almost gentle. They sent you here to steal from me, and when you returned, they were going to drain your magic and discard your body. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. You're lying. I'm not, but you don't have to believe me now. The bond will prove it, eventually. Cormac turned toward the door. The claiming draught I gave you severed their tracking sigils. Made you invisible to their magic. It also bound your magical core to mine, which means if they try to harvest you now, they'll have to go through me first. A claiming draught. Hollis's voice was barely a whisper. You gave me a claiming draught. Yes. Without my consent. Yes. Cormac paused at the door. I know that's not forgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to survive long enough to understand why I did it. He left. The door closed behind him. Hollis stood alone in the observatory, the bond humming in his chest, his magic singing with a power he'd never known he possessed. He should have been furious. He should have been terrified. He should have been planning his escape. Instead, he pressed his hand to his chest and felt the tether pulsing like a second heartbeat. What have you done to me? The bond didn't answer. But somewhere in the tower below, he felt Cormac's presence. Steady, patient, waiting. The first 3 weeks were a war of attrition. Hollis tried to maintain his cover. He continued mapping the tower, noting the locations of locked cases and warded chambers. He continued searching for the grimoire the council had sent him to steal. He continued telling himself that Cormac was the enemy. If you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Patreon, where you'll also get access to exclusive and uncensored stories I can't post on YouTube. That the claiming draught was a violation, that his mission was still intact. But the bond made everything complicated. It hummed in his chest constantly, not painful, but present. He could feel Cormac's emotions through it. The Alpha's patience, his curiosity, his strange, guarded tenderness. He could feel Cormac's location in the tower, could sense when the Alpha was working in his study or walking the parapets or simply standing at a window, looking out over the vale. And Cormac, Hollis knew, could feel him in return. You're not sleeping, Cormac said one evening. They were in the library, surrounded by books that smelled like old leather and older magic. Hollis had been pretending to read for the past hour. The bond keeps me awake. The bond shouldn't cause insomnia. If it's disrupting your rest, I can adjust it. You can adjust it. Hollis looked up sharply. You can control it. I can control the intensity, not the connection itself. Cormac set down his book. The claiming draught creates a permanent link. But the volume, so to speak, can be adjusted. I've been keeping it muted to give you space. If it's interfering with your sleep, I can lower it further. You've been keeping it muted. Yes. So you could have turned it off completely. You could have made it so I didn't feel anything at all. Cormac was quiet for a moment. I could have. But that would have defeated the purpose. The purpose being control. The purpose being protection. The bond lets me know if you're in danger. If the council tries to reclaim you, I'll feel it instantly, no matter where you are. He paused. I know you don't trust me. I know you think I'm the villain in this story. But I need you to understand. Everything I've done has been to keep you alive. Even the claiming draught. Especially the claiming draught. Hollis stared at him. The bond hummed between them, and for the first time, he let himself feel it fully, not fighting it, not resenting it, just experiencing it. The connection was intimate in a way that frightened him. Cormac's presence wasn't just external. It was threaded through his own magic, woven into the fabric of his being. I was sent here to destroy you, Hollis said quietly. I know. And you kept me anyway. I kept you because you deserved better than what the council planned for you. I kept you because when I looked at you, I saw someone who was trying so hard to be what they'd been told to be that they'd forgotten how to be themselves. Cormac met his eyes. I kept you because I wanted to see who you were underneath the mission. And now? Now that you've seen. Now I want you to stay. Not because the bond compels you. Because you choose to. The words hung in the air between them. Hollis felt something shift inside him. A wall he'd been maintaining since the first night, cracking. I don't know how to choose anymore, he whispered. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. The council. The mission. You. I don't know what's real. This is real. Cormac reached out, his hand stopping just short of Hollis's face. Not touching. Waiting. Whatever else is true, this is real. Hollis closed his eyes. The bond pulsed. And somewhere in the space between them, something that had been broken began, slowly, painfully, to heal. The heat arrived without warning. 18 days early. Catastrophic. Hollis woke at 3 a.m. burning from the inside out, his skin too hot, his thoughts fragmenting, every cell of his body screaming for something he'd been suppressing for 6 years. The claiming draught had overridden everything, his suppressants, his control, his carefully constructed armor. He tried to contain it. Curled on the floor of his chamber, shaking, pressing his forehead against the cold stone. He'd been trained for this. He could control his body. But his body wasn't entirely his anymore. It was tethered to Cormac, and it knew this, and it wanted what the Alpha could provide. The bond carried his distress like a signal fire. Cormac arrived in the doorway already moving. He took in Hollis's state with a single glance. The trembling, the fever flush, the way his hands were fisted against the floor, and something in his expression hardened into purpose. When was your last suppression dose? 3 days ago. Hollis's voice was ragged. They said they weren't working. I thought I had more time. Cormac knelt beside him. The claiming draught interferes with suppression magic. Your body is experiencing its first natural heat in 6 years. The suppressants were blocking everything. Your magic, your instincts, your ability to bond. Now they've failed, and your system is in shock. I can't, Hollis gasped as another wave hit. I can't do this. You can. But not alone. Cormac gathered him up, lifted him bodily, and carried him from the chamber. He brought Hollis to a different room. A sanctuary. It was smaller than the main chambers, lined with soft fabrics and lit by a single candle. The air smelled like cedarwood and old paper and something else. Cormac's scent, alpha strong, surrounding him from every direction. This will help, Cormac said, laying him on the bed. The heat is your magic rebelling against suppression. Once you stop fighting it, it becomes manageable. But you have to let it happen. I don't know how. Hollis's voice cracked. I've spent my whole life fighting it. I know. Cormac sat beside him, close but not touching. I'm here. I'll talk you through it. What if Hollis couldn't finish. What if you what? What if I lose myself? What if I become someone I don't recognize? What if I need you so badly I forget who I am? Cormac seemed to understand without hearing the words. Then I'll remind you. When it's over, I'll remind you of who you are. The heat crested. Hollis stopped fighting. He remembered fragments afterward. The weight of Cormac's hand on his forehead. The Alpha's voice, low and steady, naming the stars visible through the window. The bond humming between them like a living thing, carrying comfort instead of command, presence instead of possession. When he finally surfaced, exhausted, hollowed out, strangely clean, Cormac was still there, still sitting beside the bed, still watching him with those dark, patient eyes. "You stayed," Hollis whispered. "I said I would. The bond, it's different now. It's settled. Your magic has accepted the connection instead of fighting it." Cormac paused. "That doesn't mean you've surrendered. It means you've stopped hurting yourself to resist something that was already true." Hollis looked away. "I was supposed to be stronger than this." Strength isn't the same as resistance. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting. 3 weeks later, the council came. A messenger arrived at dawn, a healer named Aldwin, someone Hollis recognized from his training. The visit was supposed to be routine. A check-in. An assessment of how the apprentice was progressing. Hollis was in Cormac's study when Aldwin arrived, working on a translation exercise. Cormac introduced him as his research assistant, one hand resting on the small of Hollis's back with clear possession. The gesture was casual, automatic, and absolutely deliberate. Aldwin's eyes flickered. Something passed across his face. Surprise, recalculation, the dawning awareness that the situation had changed. "We've been concerned," Aldwin said carefully, "that you might be experiencing adjustment difficulties. Cormac can be intense with new apprentices." "Hollis is doing exceptional work," Cormac said smoothly, "and he's not having difficulties." After Aldwin left, the pretense collapsed. "Your people sent you to spy on me," Cormac said. "How long did you think you could hide that?" Hollis's heart stopped. "You knew. Since the beginning. The forged credentials. The recording crystal. The way you asked questions that were just slightly too specific." Cormac's voice was calm, but something burned beneath it. "What I didn't know was whether you'd keep trying after the bond settled. After the heat. After everything." "I stopped." Hollis's voice shook. "I don't know when exactly, but I stopped. The mission didn't matter anymore." "Why?" "Because you held me through the worst night of my life. Because the bond isn't a cage, it's a lifeline. Because somewhere between the claiming draught and the heat, I stopped wanting to destroy you." But he couldn't say any of that. "Not yet. Because I realized the council was using me," he said instead. "The same way they've been using Omegas for decades. I was a tool to them. A vessel. A means to an end." "Yes." Cormac stepped closer. "And you are not a tool to me. Then what am I?" Cormac's hand found his face. Gentle. Deliberate. "You're the person I've been waiting 7 years to find. Someone the council marked and I refused to let them take. Someone who deserves better than being a pawn in a war they didn't start." Hollis closed his eyes. "I don't know what to do with that." "Neither do I. But we'll figure it out together." Cormac paused. "If you want to." The word hung between them. Want. Not obligation. Not the bond. Not the mission. Just choice. "Yes," Hollis whispered. "I want to." The grimoire was hidden in a vault beneath the tower. Cormac brought him there that night. The vault was warded with layers of magic that shimmered and parted at Cormac's touch, revealing shelves of forbidden texts. The grimoire was the largest, bound in leather that looked disturbingly like skin, filled with binding sigils and forcing spells. "The council sent you to steal this," Cormac said. "Did they tell you why?" Hollis stared at the pages. "They said it was dangerous. That you were using it to harm Omegas." "They lied. This grimoire belongs to the council. These are their techniques, forced bonds, magical slavery, harvesting procedures. They've been using this magic on Omegas for decades." Cormac's voice hardened. "When I discovered what they were doing, I stole the grimoire. I've been protecting it ever since. They told me you were the monster." "I know. They've been telling everyone that for years. It's easier to demonize one rogue sorcerer than to admit the entire institution is corrupt." Cormac turned to face him. "I bound you to protect you. The moment I recognized their magical signature on you, I knew they were planning to harvest you. The claiming draught severed their tracking, made you invisible to their spells. The marks on my wrists, Hollis whispered. The ones that appeared after the heat. Those are council marks. Yes. And they're fading. Another few weeks, and they'll be gone completely. Hollis looked down at his hands. The marks were still there, faint, but visible. Evidence of a system that had been planning to drain his magic and discard his body. I was supposed to help them destroy you, he said quietly. And instead you saved my life. Yes. Why? Cormac didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I've spent 7 years fighting alone. Because when you walked into my tower, I saw someone who was just as trapped as I was, just in a different cage. Because I wanted to believe that two broken people could be less broken together than apart. The grimoire lay open between them, its pages filled with horrors. But in the dim light of the vault, something else was visible too. The bond, pulsing gently, steady and patient and absolutely real. I'm not leaving, Hollis said. Whatever happens next, I'm not leaving. Cormac's expression cracked. You don't have to. I know. I'm choosing to. The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was desperate and fierce and absolutely necessary. Two people who had been fighting alone for so long finally, impossibly, finding each other in the dark. The siege began at dawn. Hollis woke to the sound of wards shattering. Layer after layer of protective magic cracking like ice under pressure. The tower shuddered. Books fell from shelves. Somewhere below, Cormac was already shouting orders to Evander and Fennec, the only two allies who had stayed through the long months of isolation. Through the narrow window of his chamber, Hollis could see them. Council operatives. 15 at least, moving through the outer courtyard in tactical formation, their spelled armor glinting in the grey morning light. At their head was a woman he recognized with a clarity that felt like a blade between his ribs. Lyra. She had trained him. 18 months of instruction, of encouragement, of careful manipulation disguised as mentorship. She had told him he was special, that his mission mattered, that he was serving a greater good. She had lied about everything, his purpose, his value, the fate that awaited him when he returned with the grimoire. Now she was here to collect what she believed was hers. Hollis. Cormac appeared in the doorway, already armored in spelled leather. A thin cut across his cheekbone was already healing, but his expression was grim. They are here for you. And the grimoire. Evander and Fennec are holding the lower levels, but we don't have much time. I know. The observatory is the most protected room in the tower. I need you to stay there until... No. Cormac's jaw tightened. The bond between them pulsed with his frustration. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. Hollis stepped toward him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm not hiding while you fight my battle. The bond works both ways now. You said it yourself after the heat. My magic has accepted the connection. It's stronger than it's ever been. Hollis. I spent my whole life being told what to do. By the council. By my training. By you, when you gave me that claiming draught without asking. He met Cormac's eyes and didn't look away. I'm done being controlled. If we're going to survive this, we do it together. As equals. Or not at all. Something shifted in Cormac's expression. The frustration didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else. Something that looked almost like pride. The observatory, he said finally. We make our stand there. It's the highest ground, and the wards are thickest. But if we do this together, you follow my lead. You don't take risks you don't have to. You don't sacrifice yourself for me. And you don't sacrifice yourself for me. A pause. Then Cormac's mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. We're both terrible at this. Absolutely. Let's go be terrible together. They climbed the spiral stairs side by side. The battle was brutal and brief. Evander and Fennec held the lower levels as long as they could, their magic flaring bright against the council's assault. Hollis heard the fighting below, spells cracking against stone, shouted orders, the terrible wet sound of magic meeting flesh. Then silence. Then footsteps on the stairs. Lyra entered the observatory with 5 operatives behind her. The dawn light streamed through the shattered windows, casting her face in sharp relief. She looked exactly the way Hollis remembered, precise, composed, terrifying in her absolute calmness. "You've made this very difficult," she said. "The Council invested significant resources in your training. We expected a return on that investment. The Council was planning to harvest me. The Council was planning to use you. There's a meaningful difference." Lyra's gaze flicked to Cormac, assessing, calculating. "And you. The rogue sorcerer who's been stealing our assets. Still protecting Omegas who don't want to be saved." "He wants to be saved," Cormac said quietly. "He just didn't know it until now." Touchingly romantic. Also irrelevant. Lyra raised her hand, magic gathering at her fingertips in a cold blue glow. "The grimoire. The Omega. Surrender both, and I'll let you walk away from this tower alive. Refuse, and I'll bring the building down around you." "No," Cormac said. The spell she launched was devastating. It shattered the remaining observatory windows and hit Cormac full force, a concentrated blast of harvesting magic designed to strip an alpha's power from his body. Cormac was thrown backward into the stone wall. Blood bloomed across his chest where the magic had shredded flesh and fabric alike. He didn't scream. Cormac never screamed, but the sound he made was worse. A choked gasp of shock and pain. Hollis moved without thought. The bond ignited with a fury he hadn't known he possessed. His magic, newly awakened, finally accepted, absolutely his own, poured out of him in a wave that knocked Lyra's operatives off their feet. He caught Cormac before he hit the ground, pressing both hands to the wound, pouring healing magic through the bond with an intensity that made his vision blur. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you now. Stay with me." Cormac's eyes found his. Blood at the corner of his mouth. Pain in every line of his face. But beneath it, something steady. Something unbroken. "Your magic, it's equal to yours now. The bond isn't a leash anymore. It's a bridge." Hollis felt his power stabilizing, strengthening, drawing from the connection instead of being drained by it. The claiming bond had been designed for hierarchy, but something in the way they'd fought for each other had changed it. Made it something new. "And I'm not letting anyone take you from me." Lyra was already regrouping, her operatives forming a new attack pattern in the shattered observatory. But something in her expression had changed. Surprise. Reassessment. The cold calculation of someone encountering a variable they hadn't anticipated. "The bond has equalized," she said. "That's not supposed to happen. Claiming drafts are designed to create hierarchy, not balance. The Omega is supposed to be subordinate." "Then your drafts were designed wrong," Hollis said, rising to his feet. He placed himself between Lyra and Cormac, his hands still glowing with residual magic. "Or maybe you never understood what bonds were supposed to be. Maybe you've spent so long treating Omegas as vessels that you forgot we're people." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "This changes nothing. The Council will still claim what belongs to it." "I don't belong to the Council. I never did. I was just too afraid to admit it." Hollis felt Cormac's hand brush his ankle. A touch of reassurance, of solidarity, of presence. "Now I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm not alone." Lyra offered terms during the lull. A ceasefire. A parley. She came alone to the Great Hall an hour later while Cormac was being healed in the chamber above. Evander and Fennec flanked Hollis, their expressions wary, their magic still crackling at their fingertips from the fight. "Your mother," Lyra said without preamble. "She's in a council facility in the capital. Healing from complications from an old injury, the one she sustained when your father died. The costs are substantial. More than you could repay in a lifetime of honest work." Hollis felt the blood drain from his face. "You're threatening my mother." "I'm informing you of the stakes. The council has been bearing those costs in exchange for your compliance. Your training. Your mission. Your loyalty." Lyra paused, letting the words settle. Withdraw the claiming bond. Help us contain Cormac. In exchange, we'll remove your council marks and release your mother from all debt. She'll be free, cared for, safe. And if I refuse, then the debt reverts to your family. Your mother will be released from the facility, without treatment, without support, without the resources she needs to survive her condition. Lyra's voice was perfectly calm. The choice is yours. Hollis's hands were shaking. He thought of his mother, her tired eyes, her trembling hands, the way she had looked at him before he left for the tower. Proud, afraid, already grieving, as if she'd known even then that she might never see him again. She has nothing to do with this, he said. She has everything to do with this. She's the reason you agreed to the mission in the first place. The reason you've spent 18 months being shaped into a weapon. Lyra's smile was thin and utterly without warmth. Did you think the council chose you randomly? Your mother's debt, her illness, her dependence on our facilities, all of it made you the perfect candidate. Desperate, loyal, willing to sacrifice anything for the people you love. The words landed like physical blows. Hollis had known, on some level, that the council had manipulated him. But hearing it stated so plainly, hearing that his love for his mother had been weaponized against him, was different. It made the betrayal not just political but personal. There's another option, Lyra continued. Sign a voluntary bonding contract with a council-designated alpha, one of our senior handlers. Accept your role in the harvest program. Your mother stays protected. You keep your life. You serve the greater good as you were always meant to. The greater good. Hollis laughed, and the sound was bitter and broken. You keep using that phrase, but all I hear is serve us. Obey us. Be our tool until there's nothing left of you to use. Call it what you want. The choice remains the same, your mother's safety or your alpha's survival. You cannot have both. Hollis closed his eyes. The bond hummed in his chest, Cormac's distant awareness, his pain, his steady, stubborn presence. The alpha was listening through the connection, feeling his turmoil, waiting to see what he would choose. He thought of his mother, her tired eyes, the way she had held him after his father died, whispering that they would survive, that they would find a way, that she believed in him. He thought of Cormac, the weight of his hand during the heat, the crack in his voice when he'd said stay, the way he had stood between Hollis and the council without hesitation, without calculation, without any motive except the desperate need to protect someone who had been sent to destroy him. I refuse, Hollis said. Lyra's expression went cold. You're making a mistake. No, I'm making a choice. The first real choice I've made in years. He stood, his legs steady now, his voice clear. Tell the council they can't have me. They can't have the grimoire. And they can't have Cormac. Whatever happens next, whatever it costs, I'll face it as myself. Not as a spy. Not as a tool. As someone who chose. This isn't over. I know. But I'm not running anymore. And I'm not fighting alone. Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the great hall, her footsteps echoing on the stone. The siege resumed an hour later. But something had changed. Hollis could feel it. In the bond, in his magic, in the way the tower itself seemed to hum with approval. When he returned to the healing chamber, Cormac was sitting up, his chest bandaged, his eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. You refused her offer, Cormac said. Yes. Your mother will have to forgive me, because a puppet can't protect anyone, and I'm done being a puppet. Hollis crossed the room and took Cormac's hand. The bond pulsed between them, steady and warm. You said once that you wanted me to stay because I chose to. This is me choosing. Not the bond. Not the heat. Not the council's threats. Just me. Cormac's eyes were wet. I don't deserve this. No. But you have it anyway. And we're going to survive this. Together. Outside, the siege continued. Spells crackling against wards, operatives regrouping for another assault. But inside the healing chamber, in the quiet space between heartbeats, Something that had been broken was finally, impossibly, beginning to heal. The claiming bond settled deeper. Not a cage. Not a leash. A foundation. The counterattack came at midnight. Cormac had spent 3 days healing, and 3 days planning. Evander and Fennec had gathered intelligence from the council operatives they'd captured during the siege, locations, schedules, the names of senior handlers who would be present at the headquarters. The grimoire had been studied, its pages photographed and copied, its evidence distributed to allies across the continent. Now there was nothing left but the final strike. "We don't have to do this," Cormac said. They stood at the edge of the shattered veil, looking down at the distant lights of the capital. The council headquarters was visible even from here. A massive structure of white stone and gleaming spires, beautiful and terrible and completely unapologetic about what it was. "Yes, we do." Hollis adjusted the strap of his satchel. Inside were copies of the grimoire's most damning pages, along with testimony from Omegas who had escaped the harvest program. "If we don't expose them now, they'll rebuild. They'll find new Omegas to drain. New spies to weaponize. New ways to hide what they've been doing. You sound like me. I've been spending too much time with you." Cormac almost smiled. "There's no such thing." They made their way down into the capital together, moving through shadows and side streets, the bond humming between them like a second heartbeat. The city was quiet at this hour. Too quiet, Hollis thought. The kind of quiet that suggested someone was waiting. The council headquarters was less guarded than expected. Evander's intelligence had indicated heavy security, but the corridors were nearly empty when they slipped inside. Cormac's wards parted the protective spells like water. Hollis's magic, now fully equalized with the alphas, dampened the sound of their footsteps and blurred their silhouettes against the walls. "This is too easy," Hollis whispered. "I know. Keep your guard up." They reached the lower levels, where the harvesting chambers were supposed to be. The corridors here were different, narrower, darker, smelling of old blood and older magic. Cells lined the walls, their doors reinforced with binding sigils. Most were empty, but in one, a young Omega sat huddled in the corner, his wrists marked with the same council sigils that were still fading from Hollis's own skin. "Can you walk?" Hollis asked, crouching beside him. The Omega looked up. He was younger than Hollis had expected, barely 18, his face still soft with adolescence. "They said I was being prepared for integration. They said it was an honor." "It's not an honor. It's harvesting. They drain your magic until there's nothing left." Hollis offered his hand. "We're here to stop them. But you need to get out. Now." The Omega hesitated. Then he took Hollis's hand. They freed 3 more Omegas before reaching the central chamber. The room was massive, its walls lined with glass cases containing artifacts Hollis didn't recognize. Spell components, binding tools, the preserved remains of magical creatures. At the center stood a stone altar carved with harvesting sigils. Lyra was waiting beside it. "I wondered how long it would take you to reach this point," she said. "The rogue Alpha and his bonded Omega, breaking into the heart of the council to expose our secrets. It's almost poetic." "Where are the other handlers?" Cormac demanded. "The senior council members." "Dispersed. We knew you were coming. You've been remarkably predictable since the siege." Lyra smiled, cold and precise. "While you've been freeing a handful of Omegas from the lower cells, the council has been evacuating its most valuable assets. The senior handlers. The financial records. The political connections that make all of this possible. You're sacrificing yourself. I'm buying time. By the time you reach the upper levels, there will be nothing left to find. The council will appear to have been dismantled, and within a year, it will resurface under a different name, in a different city, with the same mission and the same methods." Lyra's gaze flicked to Hollis. "You've chosen the losing side, little scholar. You just don't know it yet." Hollis stepped forward. The bond pulsed with Cormac's concern, but he ignored it. "You're wrong. About all of it. About the council. About me. About what we're capable of." "Am I? You told me once that I was special. That my mission mattered. That I was serving a greater good. Hollis's voice was steady. You were right about one thing. I am serving a greater good. Just not yours. He raised his hand. His magic surged, not to attack, but to reveal. The harvesting sigils on the altar began to glow, responding to the claiming bond's unique frequency. The glass cases around them shattered one by one, their contents spilling onto the floor. And from the walls, hidden behind layers of illusion magic, documents began to materialize, records, contracts, correspondence, evidence. You underestimated us, Hollis said. You thought we'd come here to fight. We came here to expose you. Lyra's composure cracked. How? The bond. It doesn't just connect us to each other. It connects us to every Omega who's ever been harvested by this institution. Hollis felt Cormac's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. We can feel their pain, their loss. And now we're going to make sure the world knows what you did to them. The chamber filled with light, not Hollis's magic, not Cormac's, but something older. The accumulated power of every Omega whose magic had been drained in this room, finally released. Lyra screamed. The altar cracked down the middle. And when the light faded, the evidence was everywhere. Irrefutable. Absolute. The aftermath was chaos. The documents Hollis had exposed spread through the capital within days. Allies Cormac had cultivated over 7 years of resistance emerged from the shadows. Former healers, escaped Omegas, political reformers who had long suspected the council's corruption but lacked proof. The senior handlers who had escaped the initial exposure were hunted down, arrested, or forced into hiding. Hollis's mother was found in a council facility on the outskirts of the capital. She was weak, underweight, but alive. Evander brought her to the tower personally, and when Hollis saw her, really saw her, for the first time in months, he broke down. I'm sorry, he whispered, holding her hands. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I had to choose. You chose yourself, his mother said. Her voice was thin but steady. You chose to stop being a tool. That's not something to apologize for. I put you in danger. You put yourself in danger. For years. For me. She touched his face, her fingers trembling. I never wanted you to be my protector. I wanted you to be free. I'm free now. Or something close to it. Then it was worth it. 3 weeks later, the Council of Healers was officially dissolved. In its place, a provisional council was formed, composed of healers, Omega advocates, and magical ethicists who had opposed the old regime. Cormac was offered a seat. He refused. I'm not a politician, he told Hollis. I'm a protector. That's all I've ever wanted to be. Then protect. There are still Omegas out there who need help. Facilities that need to be exposed. Bonds that need to be broken. Hollis took his hand. We can do it together. Together, Cormac repeated. The words sounded like a promise. The pregnancy progressed slowly. Hollis's body had never experienced a natural heat before the claiming draught, had never been prepared for the possibility of carrying a child. The first trimester was brutal. Exhaustion, nausea, a bone-deep weariness that made even walking across the tower feel like climbing a mountain. Cormac was relentless in his care. He brought tea. He adjusted the tower's wards to block out external magical interference. He sat beside Hollis during the worst nights, one hand on his stomach, murmuring soothing words in languages Hollis didn't recognize. You're going to be a good father, Hollis said one evening. They were in the observatory, watching the stars wheel overhead. The dome had been repaired since the siege, the glass replaced, the shattered instruments restored. I'm going to try. Cormac's voice was quiet. I didn't have a good example. My father was not kind. Mine either. Not in the ways that mattered. So we'll be better. Not perfect. I don't think either of us knows how to be perfect. But better. Hollis leaned against him. Better is enough. The birth was long and difficult and absolutely worth it. Hollis labored for 18 hours in the tower's highest chamber, surrounded by candles and healing wards and the steady, anchoring presence of Cormac's hand in his. Physician Kale, a healer who had defected from the council years ago, attended him, her voice calm and competent. When the child finally emerged, he was small and furious and perfect. Dark hair like Cormac's. Eyes that would probably darken to match. A cry that filled the chamber with sound and life and absolute, undeniable presence. A boy, Kale said, placing him on Hollis's chest. Hollis looked down at his son and felt something crack open inside him. Not painfully. Relievingly. Like a door he'd kept locked for years finally swinging wide. Alexei, he whispered. After your father's father. The one who tried to be better. Cormac made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. He would have hated that name. He always said it was too old-fashioned. Then it's perfect. They held him together, their hands overlapping, the bond humming with a joy so fierce it felt like grief. Outside, the tower was quiet. The veil stretched into darkness, scarred but beautiful. And inside the chamber, two broken people held their son and began the real work of being a family. 6 months later, Hollis stood at the window of the tower's highest room and watched the sun rise over the shattered veil. Cormac joined him, Alexei asleep against his shoulder. The baby had his father's intensity and his mother's stubbornness, a combination that promised interesting years ahead. You're thinking, Cormac said. I'm always thinking. About what? Hollis was quiet for a moment. About the person I was when I arrived here. The spy. The tool. The Omega who didn't know he was being harvested. He turned to look at Cormac. I thought I was coming here to destroy you. Instead, you saved me. I bound you without your consent. I took your choice away. That's not saving. No. But you also gave me a reason to choose. You showed me what the council really was. You stood between me and them when it would have been easier to let them take me. Hollis stepped closer. You made mistakes. Terrible ones. But you also stayed. Every day. Even when I hated you. Even when I tried to leave. Even when the bond was the only thing keeping us connected. I stayed because I love you. I know. And I love you. Not because the bond compels me. Because you earned it. Cormac's eyes were wet. He shifted Alexei to one arm and reached for Hollis with the other, pulling him close. The bond hummed between them. Steady, patient, absolutely real. What happens now? Hollis asked. Now we keep going. We rebuild what the council destroyed. We raise our son to be better than either of us. We make mistakes and apologize for them and try again. Cormac pressed his forehead to Hollis's. We choose each other. Every day. For the rest of our lives. That sounds exhausting. It will be. It will also be worth it. Hollis looked out at the veil. The sun was fully risen now, painting the scarred landscape in shades of gold and amber. It was still ugly. Still broken. Still marked by ancient catastrophe. But it was also beautiful. Alive. Real. Like him. Like Cormac. Like the bond that had begun as a cage and become a foundation. I'm ready, Hollis said. Whatever comes next. I'm ready. The claiming bond pulsed with quiet contentment. Not perfection. Not certainty. Just presence. Just home.